The first thing I noticed about that apartment wasn't fear. It was the feeling that I had entered something slightly out of alignment, and whatever was there had quietly corrected itself. I moved to Oregon for a short-term contract job. It was supposed to last 3 months, maybe 4 if they extended it. I didn't know anyone in the city, so I chose an apartment complex close to work. Nothing special, nothing expensive. Building was new enough to look clean, but old enough to feel worn. Long gray hallways, fluorescent lights that hummed softly, identical white doors stretching down each floor. It was the kind of place where you didn't expect anything memorable to happen. My unit was at the very end of the 3rd floor hallway. There was only one other apartment near mine, directly across the hall. I saw the guy who lived there a few times. He was quiet, middle-aged, and never stayed to talk. Just a brief nod if we crossed paths. The apartment itself was normal. Living room, small kitchen, bathroom, bedroom at the back. Nothing stood out at first. The first night, I unpacked my things and went to bed exhausted. I slept fine. No strange dreams, no noises, nothing that would have made me uneasy. It wasn't until the second day that I noticed the bedroom felt different. Every time I stepped inside it, the air seemed to change. Not in a way I could measure. Not cold, not warm, just altered, like the room had been sealed moments before I entered and was slowly readjusting. I assumed it was ventilation. Maybe the air circulation in that part of the apartment wasn't great. I checked the vents, opened the window, even left the door open for a while to air it out. The feeling didn't go away. What made it harder to ignore was that it only happened when I fully entered the room. If I stood in the doorway, everything felt normal. The moment both feet crossed the threshold, my body reacted first. A slight tightening in my chest, a sense of pressure behind my ears, like stepping into a space that was already being used. By the end of the first week, I noticed a sound. It was subtle enough that I almost missed it at first. A soft creak higher than the floor, lower than the ceiling. Not a pop, not a crack, more like something adjusting under weight. The timing bothered me. The sound didn't happen when I walked around inside the bedroom. It didn't happen when I sat on the bed or opened drawers. It only happened when I entered the room. I tried to convince myself it was coincidence. Buildings make noise, especially newer ones. But coincidence doesn't repeat itself the same way every time. One night, after work, I decided to test it. I turned off the TV, shut down my laptop, and stood in the hallway outside the bedroom. The apartment was completely quiet. I opened the bedroom door and leaned in without stepping inside. Nothing happened. I stood there for nearly a minute listening. Still nothing. Still nothing. Then I stepped into the room. The creak responded immediately. I stepped back out. Silence. I stepped in again. The same sound. It wasn't loud. It wasn't aggressive. But it was precise. Like a response. I closed the door and stood there longer than I'd like to admit, staring at the handle, trying to think of a logical explanation that didn't feel forced. That night, lying in bed, I had trouble falling asleep. Not because I was scared, but because I felt registered, like the room knew I was there. Nothing happened. No footsteps, no voices, no shadows. Just that persistent sense that if I moved, the space would take note. Over the next few days, the feeling intensified. The bedroom felt heavier at night. Sometimes the air seemed stale, even with the window open. I started noticing small things. My bedsheets slightly wrinkled on one side when I was sure I hadn't touched them. The faint impression of weight near the edge of the mattress. I started changing clothes in the living room. One evening, came home later than usual. It was close to PM, and I was exhausted. I walked straight to the bedroom without thinking. The moment I stepped inside, the sound happened again, but this time, it didn't stop. Instead of a single creak, it stretched into a slow, deliberate shift, like pressure moving across something solid, like someone adjusting their stance. I froze. The sound lasted only a few seconds, but it felt longer. When it stopped, the room felt warmer. Not physically warm, occupied. That was the first night I didn't sleep in the bedroom. The next day, I bought a cheap door alarm from a hardware store. One of those small plastic devices that screeches if the door opens. I installed it on the bedroom door, tested it twice, and slept on the couch. Around 2:20 in the morning, I woke up suddenly. The apartment was silent. Then I heard the sound again. It came from inside the bedroom. The alarm didn't go off. That realization hit me harder than the sound itself, because whatever made the noise hadn't opened the door. The creak happened again, closer this time, right at the door. I turned on my phone's flashlight and aimed it at the bedroom. The handle was angled slightly downward, as if it had just been released. I stood up slowly and backed toward the front door. The sound shifted again. This time, it wasn't coming from inside the bedroom. It was coming from the hallway, from my side of the door. I didn't wait to see anything else. I left the apartment, went down the stairs, and sat in my car shaking for nearly an hour. When I finally went back inside, the bedroom alarm was still armed and untouched. The next morning, called my landlord and asked if anyone else had access to my unit. He said only maintenance. When I asked if anyone had complained about the bedroom before, he paused. Then he asked me if I was having trouble sleeping. I packed my essentials that same day and left. 2 days later, returned during daylight to get the rest of my belongings. The bedroom felt completely normal in the light, which somehow made it worse. As I carried my last box out, my neighbor across the hall was standing in his doorway watching me. I told him I was moving out. He nodded once and said quietly, "I noticed you, didn't it?" I didn't ask what he meant, because the way he said it told me he already knew. I've lived in many places since then. No strange rooms, no responding sounds, but sometimes, late at night, I think about that bedroom, not because I believe something supernatural lived there, but because it didn't feel hostile. It felt attentive, and once something notices you, you can never be sure it forgets. I've always been the kind of person who stops when someone needs help. Not because I think I'm brave, but because I was raised that way. If someone's car breaks down, you slow down. If someone looks lost, you ask if they're okay. It never occurred to me that this instinct could be used against me. This happened when I was driving home late through rural Missouri after visiting a friend. It was just after midnight. I remember checking the clock on my dashboard because the road was completely empty, and I wanted to know how long I'd been driving without seeing another car. The highway had narrowed into a 2-lane road surrounded by trees on both sides. Says, no streetlights, just long stretches of darkness, broken only by my headlights. And oh who, I wasn't tired. I wasn't distracted. The drive felt normal. Then I saw him. At first, he was just a shape at the edge of my headlights, a figure standing on the shoulder of the road, partially turned toward the trees. As I got closer, I'd see he was waving one arm slowly, deliberately. I eased off the gas without thinking. He looked normal, middle-aged, average height, clean jeans, a dark jacket zipped up to his chest. No blood, no limp, no obvious injury. I rolled my window down halfway and asked if he was okay. That detail stuck with me later. He could have stepped fully into the light, but he didn't. He told me his car had broken down a few miles back and his phone was dead. He asked if I could give him a ride to the next town. His voice was calm, too calm for someone stranded alone at night. I told him I could call roadside assistance for him. The moment I said that, his expression changed. It wasn't anger, it wasn't panic, it was disappointment. He shook his head slowly and said, "No, that won't work." Then he leaned closer to the window and said something that made my stomach tighten. "I just need you." There was no urgency in his voice, an O pleading. He said it the way someone says something they've already decided. I told him I wasn't too comfortable giving a ride to a stranger and that I really could call for help if he wanted. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he stepped back slightly and looked past me, down the empty road behind my car, like he was checking something. Then he smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It didn't reach his eyes. He asked me to unlock the door. They were clean. That's when I noticed his shoes. Not just clean, spotless. No dirt, no dust, no grass stains. Which didn't make sense for someone who claimed to have been walking along that road for miles. I told him no. His smile faded instantly, without raising his voice, without changing his tone. He said, "You've already stopped." That was the hard part. Something about that sentence made every instinct in my body light up at once. I rolled my window up and put the car in drive. As I pulled away, I watched him in my side mirror. He didn't chase the car. He didn't yell. He just stood there, watching, his arms slowly dropping back to his side. I told myself I was overreacting. I drove another 10 minutes without seeing anyone else. Then I saw him again. This time, he was standing farther down the same road, waving. Same jacket, same posture, same slow movement. My heart started pounding. There was no way he could have walked that distance that fast. And even if he had, there were no side roads, no shortcuts. I didn't slow down this time. As I passed him, I glanced over. He was smiling again, but now, he was waving with both hands. I drove the rest of the way home, gripping the steering wheel so hard my hands hurt. I didn't sleep much that night, but by morning, I'd convinced myself there had to be a rational explanation. Maybe it was a different person. Maybe I'd looped back somehow without realizing it. A week later, I had almost forgotten about it. Then it happened again. Different road, different town, same state. I was driving home from work later than usual, taking a shortcut through another rural stretch. This time, it was closer to M. I saw a figure ahead. Before my brain could even register it, my body reacted. I felt that same tightness in my chest. It was him. Same jacket, same jeans. This time, he wasn't waving. He was standing in the middle of the road. I slowed down just enough to see his face clearly. He looked exactly the same. Not older, not tired, not injured. He stepped toward my car and raised his hand not to wave, but to signal me to stop. I didn't. I swerved around him and kept driving. In my rearview mirror, I saw him turn and watch me go. He didn't move. The next day, I told a coworker about it, trying to laugh it off. I described the man, the roads, the timing. My coworker went quiet. He asked me which jacket the man was wearing. When I told him, he swallowed and said something I didn't expect. "That sounds like the guy they warned us about." Apparently, a few people in nearby towns had reported encounters with a man matching that description. Always late at night, always on empty roads, always asking for help, and always appearing again farther down the road if someone stopped. No one knew how he did it. No one ever reported him being violent, but everyone who stopped said the same thing. He never wanted a phone call. He never wanted directions. He wanted to be let inside the car. After that, I avoided back roads at night. Months went by without incident. Then, one night, as I was pulling into my apartment complex, I saw someone standing near the entrance. For a split second, my heart jumped, but it wasn't him. It was just a neighbor. Still, I didn't relax until I was inside my apartment with the door locked. I haven't seen the man since, but sometimes, when I drive at night and see someone on the side of the road, waving for help, I don't slow down anymore. Because I learned something important. Some people don't want help. They want access. And the most dangerous thing you can do isn't stopping. It's believing that everyone who asks needs saving. I've never been paranoid about technology. I don't cover my webcam. I don't unplug things at night. I don't believe my phone is listening to me more than it already has to. That's why it took me so long to realize something was wrong. This happened when I was living alone in Colorado, working a remote job that required me to log my hours precisely. Everything I did was track login times, keystrokes, screen activity. It wasn't invasive, just documented. At least that's what I thought. One Friday morning, I logged into my work portal and noticed something odd in my activity log. It showed I had logged in at 2:14 a.m. That didn't make sense. I live alone, and I'm a light sleeper. I don't wake up during the night, and I definitely don't work at 2 in the morning. I assumed it was a glitch. I refreshed the page. The entry stayed. I checked the following days. There were more. Short sessions, 10 minutes, sometimes 5. Always between 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock a.m. Always marked as active. Always logged under my credentials. I told myself the system was misreading something, maybe an update. Maybe background syncing. I ignored it. A week later, my supervisor messaged me. He asked why I'd been working such odd hours. I asked him what he meant. He sent me a screenshot. It showed my activity log from their side. According to it, I'd been logging in almost every night for the past 2 weeks. Not just logging in, navigating files, opening folders, scrolling. I laughed it off and told him it must be a system error. He didn't laugh. He told me the logs were pulled directly from screen recordings. That got my attention. I asked him to send one. He hesitated, then forwarded a short clip. The video opened on my desktop. My desktop. Same wallpaper, same folders, same browser bookmarks. The cursor moved slowly across the screen, opening files I recognized but hadn't touched in months. The movement felt wrong, not jerky, not random, deliberate, like someone unfamiliar with my habits was trying to look natural. I watched the entire clip. At no point did I see my reflection. No webcam feed, no audio. Just my screen, doing things I never did. I checked the timestamp, 2:17 a.m. I was asleep at that time. I was sure of it. That night, I didn't sleep well. Around a.m., I woke up without knowing why. My room was dark and quiet. My laptop was closed on the desk where I always left it. I checked the time, 2:12 a.m. I lay there listening. Nothing. I got up, walked to my desk, and opened the laptop. It was already warm. That shouldn't have been possible. I always shut it down completely at night. The activity light was off. No fans running, but the metal casing was warm under my hand. I closed it and went back to bed, telling myself it must have been residual heat. The next morning, there was another log entry, 2:14 a.m. This time, it showed a longer session, and this time, There was a recording attached. I didn't open it right away. I spent the morning trying to convince myself there was a reasonable explanation. Automatic updates. Malware. A bug. Finally, I clicked play. The recording started on my desktop again. The cursor opened a folder I didn't recognize. Inside were files labeled with dates. My dates. Birth date. Driver's license expiration. Medical appointments. Then the cursor hovered over a file named Sleep. It didn't open it. It just hovered for almost 30 seconds. Then the recording ended. I closed the laptop and sat there staring at the wall, feeling something unfamiliar settle in my chest. Not fear. Violation. I contacted IT. They ran scans. Found nothing. No malware. No remote access tools. No unauthorized logins. They suggested I change my passwords. Medium close-up of a laptop screen displaying a change your password prompt. A shadowy, indistinct figure is reflected on the screen, representing the unseen IT person. The image feels impersonal and unhelpful, highlighting the inadequacy of the proposed solution. That night, I unplugged the laptop completely and placed it in the kitchen. At 2:13 a.m., I woke up again. I didn't hear anything. I just knew. I walked into the kitchen. The laptop was open. The screen was on. The cursor wasn't moving, but a new file sat on the desktop, named with the current date. I didn't touch it. I shut the laptop, unplugged it again, and didn't open it until morning. When I finally did, the file was gone, but the activity log wasn't. It showed a session from 2:14 a.m. Duration, 12 minutes. According to the log, I had opened a document. According to the system, I had read it. I moved out 2 weeks later. I got a new laptop, new accounts, new job. The activity log stopped, but sometimes, when I wake up in the middle of the night, I check the time without meaning to, and when I see 2:14 a.m., I don't go back to sleep right away, because I still don't know what was using my credentials, and I don't know why it needed me logged in to do it. I learned very quickly that there's a difference between what happens and what is allowed to exist on record. This happened in Nevada a few years ago when my younger brother went missing. He wasn't the type to disappear. He had a routine, a job he hated but never skipped, a girlfriend he texted constantly, a beat-up car that barely made it out of town, let alone for enough to vanish without explanation. When he didn't show up to work on a Monday morning, no one panicked at first. People assumed he was sick, maybe sleeping in. By that evening, his phone was going straight to voicemail.by. The next morning, my parents called the police. The first officer we spoke to was calm, polite, almost rehearsed. He asked the standard questions. When was the last time we'd seen him? Did he have any history of mental health issues? Did he ever talk about leaving town? We answered no to all of it. 2 days passed, then 3. The officer took notes and told us someone would follow up. On the 4th day, my brother came back. He showed up at my parents' house just after midnight. I was there when he walked in. He looked raw, not injured, not disheveled, but thinner, paler, like he hadn't slept. His eyes kept darting around the room, not landing on anything for more than a second. My mother hugged him and started crying. My father asked where he'd been. He just said he needed to sit down. My brother didn't answer. When we pressed him, he told us he couldn't talk about it. Not yet. Maybe not ever. That's when I noticed something strange. He kept glancing toward the front door, like he was waiting for someone to knock. The next morning, 2 unmarked vehicles were parked across the street from my parents' house. They stayed there all day. N01 got out. N01 approached the house. They were just there. That afternoon, someone knocked on the door. He introduced himself as being with a federal agency. He didn't specify which one. He didn't show a badge for long enough to read anything on it. He said he needed to clarify some details about my brother's absence. What struck me immediately was what he didn't ask. He didn't ask where my brother had gone. He didn't ask what he'd experienced. He didn't ask why he came back when he did. Instead, he asked us what we had noticed. Had we heard any unusual sounds? Had anyone contacted us during those days? Had we spoken to anyone about the situation? It felt less like an investigation and more like damage control. When my brother tried to leave the room, the man politely asked him to stay. Not ordered, asked. But there was something final in the tone. He handed us a printed document and told us it was a summary of the situation. According to the paper, my brother had never been missing. It stated that there had been a documentation error regarding his work attendance and that his absence had been administrative in nature. The dates didn't match reality. The times were wrong. The report said he'd been accounted for the entire time. I pointed this out. The man nodded, as if he expected that reaction. He told us calmly that this was the version that would remain on record. My father asked what would happen if we disagreed. The man smiled slightly and said, "There's nothing to disagree with. This is what happened." That night, my brother didn't sleep. Neither did I. Around heard him pacing in the living room. When I went to check on him, he was sitting on the couch with his head in his hands. He finally told me a little. Not everything, just enough. He said he'd taken a wrong turn on a desert road late at night. His car stalled. His phone lost signal. He said he saw lights in the distance and assumed it was a facility or a base. He said he walked toward it. That's where his memory stopped making sense. He remembered being questioned. He remembered bright rooms. He remembered being told to repeat things until he said them correctly. He didn't remember how he got home. The next day, the unmarked cars were gone. So was the official missing persons report. When my mother called the police to ask for an update, she was told there had never been an active case. They had no record of my brother being missing. No call, no report, no follow-up. A week later, my brother received a letter. No return address. Inside was a single page. It thanked him for his cooperation and reminded him that discussing the matter would violate an agreement he did not remember signing. It also included a phone number. He never called it, but after that, things changed. He started correcting himself mid-sentence, stopping short when conversations drifted toward certain topics. He flinched whenever he saw black SUVs on the road. Once, he told me something that still bothers me. He said the worst part wasn't what happened. It was being told, repeatedly, that it hadn't. That his memory was non-compliant. That the version he remembered was unnecessary. A month later, another man came by. Different face, same calm voice. He told us the situation was resolved and that any further attempts to revisit it would only create confusion. But before he left, he said something directly to me. He said, "People assume the truth is important. What's important is consistency." My brother moved out of state shortly after that. We don't talk about it anymore. Not because we don't want to, because every time we tried, something small would happen. A phone call dropping, a visit canceled, a reminder that some versions of events aren't meant to circulate. To this day, if you look it up, my brother was never missing. According to every official record, nothing unusual happened. But I was there. I saw the cars. I read the report. And I learned something I can't unlearn. Sometimes the most disturbing thing isn't that something happened. It's that someone decided it didn't. This is difficult to explain because nothing bad happened. No one followed me. No one spoke to me. Nothing chased me, touched me, or threatened me. And that's exactly why it still bothers me. This happened in a completely ordinary way, on a completely ordinary day. It started with a letter, not an email, not a notification, a physical envelope in my mailbox when I came home from work. No return address, just my name and address printed neatly, like it had come from a business. Inside was a single sheet of paper, no letterhead, no logo, just one sentence. Tomorrow has already been recorded. I assumed it was junk mail, some kind of art project or marketing gimmick. I tossed it on the kitchen counter and forgot about it. The next morning, when I woke up, I noticed something strange. My alarm didn't go off. That wasn't unusual on its own. But when I checked my phone, it showed that I had already dismissed it. At 6:47 a.m. I always wake up at 7. I told myself I must have woken up briefly and turned it off without remembering. It happens. But the day continued like that. At breakfast, I reached for the mug I always used. It wasn't there. Instead, it was already in the sink, rinsed, like I had finished with it. I stood there for a long moment, trying to remember using it. I couldn't. At work, my computer was already logged in when I arrived. My inbox showed emails marked as read that I had no memory of opening. One of them was from my supervisor, thanking me for the conversation earlier. I hadn't spoken to him. I replied, asking what he meant. He replied back almost immediately. "We talked this morning about your schedule." I checked the timestamp, 8:12 a.m. I was on the freeway at that time. The entire day felt slightly out of sync, like I was arriving a few seconds too late to my own actions. By mid-afternoon, I felt exhausted, not physically, mentally, like I was constantly trying to catch up. When I got home that evening, I noticed the letter again, still on the counter. Tomorrow has already been recorded. That night, I didn't sleep well. At some point, I woke up and checked my phone. 6:46 a.m. The alarm icon was already highlighted. I didn't dismiss it. I just watched the screen. At 6:47, the alarm stopped by itself. I lay there, heart racing. The next day was worse. I would think about doing something, checking the weather, grabbing my keys, and then find that it had already been done. The weather app was open. My keys were in my hand. I started writing things down, trying to track myself. But the notes were already there. In my own handwriting, describing things I hadn't done yet. That afternoon, I found a notebook on my desk that I didn't remember buying. The first page read, "You are not early. You are not late." The following pages described my day in plain detail. Nothing dramatic. What I ate, who I spoke to, what time I left work. The last entry was dated tomorrow. Didn't read it. I couldn't. That night, I dreamed I was standing in a long hallway lined with doors, each labeled with a date. All of them were closed, except one. It had today's date on it, and it was locked. The next morning, I woke up holding my phone. It was open to a video, recorded from my front-facing camera. I was sleeping. The video ended exactly at 6:47 a.m. I checked the file details. Created, tomorrow. That's when I realized something. Nothing was predicting my actions. Nothing was controlling me. The day wasn't being recorded. It was being replayed. At some point, at some version of tomorrow had already lived this day. And now, I was inside the echo of it. I stopped trying to fight it. I stopped making decisions. I just followed what felt inevitable. When I reached the moment, I remembered least the evening, opened the notebook. I turned to the last page. It said, "This is where you notice." I waited. Nothing dramatic happened. The day ended. I went to sleep. The next morning, the alarm went off at 7 like normal. Nothing was pre-dismissed. Nothing was out of place. The notebook was gone. The letter was gone. Everything returned to normal, except one thing. Every once in a while, I get the feeling that I've already been here before. Not déjà vu. Something colder. Like I'm remembering something I haven't done yet. And sometimes, when I wake up just before my alarm goes off, I wonder if today is actually new, or if it's just another day that's finally caught up with me.